Welcome to this edition of Chakmah Choter on the YAHOWAH blog. I'm your host, Craig Winn. We're going to begin where we left off on our last program, reading a rather astonishing statement from Zechariah 8:11. And as we delve back into it, I have a question. And that is, with all of the insights that have been forthcoming regarding the two witnesses, regarding Dode serving as the high priest on his return on Yom Kippurim to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, to Yahweh telling us that he is going to remove the influence of religion, the whore of Babylon, and deposit this religious whore that has fostered so many false gods under Christianity, Judaism, and Islam out in Babylon, and then send 4 chariots, 3 of which will canvass the world, and 1 of which will bring God's people, the final remnant of Israel, back home. Why is it, with all of that marvelous information pursuant to our future, are so many unaware of it? You almost never hear anyone speaking of these prophetic events from Zechariah, and yet the name of the prophet means memorable men of Yahweh. And I say it's just without excuse that we have gone so long without presenting what these words actually mean. And that reminds me of something. I received a note, I don't know if it was written today or yesterday, from someone who said that they were an eager learner, and then asked that there was some verification for the translations, when, of course, the translations I'm going to share with you contain all of the Hebrew words upon which they're based, with explicit instructions as to the various resources that exist to validate them and to determine for yourself that it is accurate. And it is the commentary that provides the education. Yahweh's words have been available to read for 3,450 years, and yet mankind remains in the dark regarding what they've said. And it wasn't really until quite recently, when we joined in this collaborative effort, that it is the combination of more accurate and complete translations that can be readily verified, and the commentary that is derived from them, that this teaching became available. And we're going to continue using the exact same strategy, one that is encouraged by God, one that is necessary for God's people, which is to combine the text of what Yahweh revealed through his prophets, beginning with Moshe, continuing all the way to Malachi, with Zechariah, the current prophet, being second to last, along with a narrative that helps you understand for the first time what God is revealing to his people. And now he says, however now, wa'ata, it will not be the same as in the former days with regard to my approach to the remaining remnant of the people, prophetically declares Yahweh, of the spiritual implements. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you read something like this is, where did Yahweh provide a prophetic announcement or a contemporaneous narrative regarding an approach that is different from how he is responding now, where, as we know, he is sending out these 4 chariots, one actually remaining in Jerusalem, that is the red one, but the black, white, and dappled, he's sending them out to collect people, to put them into one of 3 categories. And so where would we read something that is quite different than that. I mean, that's the whole purpose, isn't it, of trying to understand God's testimony? You can just read it, and okay, so this is a more accurate translation than you will find in any published Bible. But what does it do for you if you don't understand it? So to help you understand it, let's just pause and think about it for a moment. Yahweh interacted with his people based upon Gan Eden, where there was free will, not a lot of information provided by God, and where a single act of rebellion against God, as was stated, led to estrangement. So this is going to be different, being not the same as in the former days. It'll be different than that. Somebody's going to get a chance to recover from a act of defiance against God. Next, we have a time when Yahweh engaged with 8 people, communicating with one, Noach, to salvage a family from the world at large. And the world at large at that time, men with an Asama, was around what was Eden, which would be under the waters of the Lake Van in eastern Turkey. And he said that man had become so terrorizing, so vicious, so religious and political, militant, that he had to do a reset. And he spoke to Noach as the one man among all men with an Asama who had deliberately set himself apart from religion and politics and was out on his own because of that separation. And that was his qualification. And then he communicated what that man needed to do to save himself and his family, and the man did it, and he did, and all others with an Asalma in that region drowned. And, we even have evidence of this story through the Berkel impact crater that confirms that it began with a deep upwelling of seawater, which is exactly what the testimony declares. So it won't be like that, where somebody has already set themselves, distinguished themselves, ready to listen to Yahweh, to do as he says, having set themselves completely apart from religion and politics, having literally moved away from the elements that are deceiving humankind. Now, in this case, I think the answer is that it's going to be different, and that God's going to retrieve his people from the swamp of human politics and religion, at least those who are open to listening, even before they do anything that is productive, because in this case, once God identifies those who can benefit, whose minds are open, who are not totally polluted and destroyed by religion and politics, he's going to provide this enormous favor for them through the sacrifice of the red heifer. So that'll be different than that. When Yahweh interacted with the first man and woman, who became the basis of narrating the conditions and the benefits of the covenant, well, there goes a Wookiee. All right, Wookiee. So sitting on the desk with me doing the show are being in Leia's arms. The Wookiee made a very fine choice. I will continue, however, because, I'm here to do a job. So in their case, they had also walked away from Babylon. They were separate. They were going on their way, having left the political and religious malfeasance and integration of truth and lies that had created the Babylonian religion that, of course, has metastasized all the way through Roman Catholicism today and has influenced both Judaism and Islam. They had left it. And Yahowah provided them at that time with a series of opportunities, of conditions if they wanted to be part of the covenant, and told them the benefits of it. And he had a narrative with them along that way. And in this regard, and with the people today, they again will not have walked away from the influence of religion and politics. Yahowah will not have directly had a conversation with them, but will have at least reached out to them through his Nakri in Choter. So that's another difference between the two. And rather than them walking to the promised land, Yahowah is going to provide airlift to bring them to the promised land. And in this case, they will not have accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant to receive its benefits, because had they had done so, they would have made the harvest of Towrah the evening before. So it will be different from that situation. It would be very different than the situation, of course, that Yahowah was probably referring to first and foremost, which would be during the Exodus, where Yahowah took them kicking and screaming away from slavery and religious oppression, political subjugation, because they didn't know him at all. And that's all they had known for 80 years. In that case, it had been probably 6 generations, because they were being worked to death, of Jews that had no idea who he was. And so the only way to free them and break that mindset of being controlled was to pull them kicking and screaming, and they were belligerents. And Yahowah finally said, I've had enough of you. And he decided he would only communicate through Moshe, as opposed to directly to them. And that's very different in this case, because at this time, Yahowah was only bringing back the willing, and he is not doing exactly the opposite. Rather than saying, I'm not going to talk to you directly again because you told me to go away, in this case, he's coming back and will begin talking to them directly again. So he's transitioning from talking through his Bashar, his Kol voice, his herald, to talking directly to them, as opposed to going the opposite direction, talking directly to them and then speaking only through Moshe. So it's going to be different than that. The next thing you think of, okay, it's going to be different. Remember what he said through Hosea. I want you to marry a temple prostitute so that you have an appreciation of what it's like to have an association with Israel, because they're a religious whore. They are the adulterous woman. I want you to have an appreciation of that. And I want you to know why I'm divorcing myself of them. And Yahowah says, and I'm leaving you. I'm going back to heaven. I'm going to have nothing to do with you going forward for a goodly period of time. I'll only interact with you sparingly. Well, this is quite different than that, because Yahowah is arranging the marriage of a prepared, a cleansed, adulterous woman, bringing actually the bride to Yisrael on behalf of his beloved son, Dod. And so rather than a divorce, he's orchestrating a wedding, a betrothal. And, that's exciting, because the benefit for both Israel and for Dod, the returning king. And rather than divorcing his people, Yahowah is, as I say, he is re-engaging with them through the marriage of Israel to his beloved son. Israel will become his children again, the opposite of what he had to declare in Hosea. And then I jump ahead to Yirmiyah 31 is the next time that I see a distinction. In Yirmiyah 31, Yahowah says that the reaffirmation of his covenant will not be as it previously was when he brought the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim with a firm and resolute hand. And again, this has some overtures to the things we have previously mentioned, but the fact is that is the other place where God says, I'm going to respond differently to my people. I'm going to reaffirm the covenant with Israel and with Yehudim, therefore not with the church, not with Gentiles, on a different basis than I did previously. And the difference is really twofold. One is that it's not forced. There'll only be volunteers that climb into that white chariot that are brought home on this day to be perfected by the sacrifice of the red heifer. And second, those who benefit from Yahweh's return and this reaffirmation of the covenant relationship that was described in Yirmiyah 31 are going to have a copy of Yahweh's Torah written inside of them. And that's a profound difference over what has happened previously. So all of these things come to mind when we read, however, now it will not be the same as in the former days with regard to my approach to the remaining remnant of the people, prophetically declares Yahweh of the spiritual implements. Now you know the ways that it will differ. For indeed, there will be a sowing and cultivating of seeds and offspring for reconciliation and salvation. Purpose of God's return is stated by the day upon which he will return. It is astonishing that I was the first person to recognize that Yahweh is going to return with Dode on the day of reconciliation, Yom Kippurim. And yet here it says quite literally that this is going to be about sowing and cultivating the seeds of the offspring for reconciliation and salvation. The other thing, of course, that is interesting here is that the verb is zera. Zera is the actionable root of zeroah. Zeroah describes three men. Moshe, whose oratory explained Yahweh's Torah instructions and whose personal experience delineated the purpose of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. Pesach opening the doorway to life, Matzah liberating the children of Israel from religious and political corruption so that they could cross the sea and become the firstborn children of Yahweh. All lived out in Moshe's experience. Then it was the second Zeroah, the great Zeroah, the sacrificial Lamb of God, Dode, who served as the Pesach El. That's why Yahweh refers to Dode as the Zeroah. In the Torah, when it speaks of Zeroah, it speaks of the sacrificial lamb. These were things for us to make intelligent connections regarding. And then it is the third and final Zeroah, the one cultivating these seeds for the final two harvests, which are on Shabuah, just a year from now, and Teruah, 8 years from now, that will be the beneficiaries of this reconciling harvest and receive their salvation. Yahweh uses a number of metaphors that are heterocultural in their orientation, and these agricultural metaphors include the vine. And the vine, because its tendrils reach out and expose them to the sun, it is a plant that is firmly rooted in the ground. It produces, the vine produces grapes, which are turned into wine that becomes symbolic of Passover. So the vine is one of those horticultural references for Yahweh's intent with his people. And it is Dode who, according to Yahweh, planted the vineyard that is on Moriah and Zion. And he is saying that those vines are going to bear fruit again, and doing so in the land, and they will offer their produce for a harvest. This is harvest time. We have the next harvest, Shabuah, just a year from now on May 22nd. 2026. And then the final harvest is Towrah, which will occur on a Friday evening, the 23rd of September, 2033. These are the final two harvests, and Yahweh is drawing our attention to them. And then it says, and then the heavens will provide their due for an abundant ingathering. Well, after the ingatherings of Shabuah and Towrah, Yahweh is going to release copious amounts of cleansing waters in association with the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, just as there was lots of water provided during the sacrifice of the bull when Eliah last orchestrated an event that was created to expose and condemn religion and politics among his people. And this dew is both a symbol of these cleansing waters being released, but also of the fact that at this time Yahweh is going to pour out his spirit from Shamaim to prepare his people for this wedding, betrothal with Dod, the king, and for his arrival. And then he says, and I will receive the remaining remnant while bestowing an inheritance to the people. This is when God's returning. It is Yom Kippurim. He is going to be able to receive his people. They will have been perfected and cleansed and prepared for that eventuality by not only having been brought to Jerusalem, but also by the sacrifice of the red heifer, the oratory that is provided at this time, explaining these events by Eliah and the miracles that Yahweh will induce into this whole process of waters and flames and purging and cleansing, as well as annihilating those who have come to harm Israel, bringing an end to the time of Jacob's troubles and bringing the beginning of forevermore. It's the most amazing time to live. And it's not just the most amazing time to live at this particular moment, these 15 days between Towrah and Sukkah in year 6000 Yah, 2033. It's even more amazing to live in these 8 years now preceding that, because we can influence the outcome. We can make the celebration bigger, bolder, greater. And by greater, it's not necessarily more, it's necessarily better. And that is the reason we're here. But unfortunately, long ago, the children of Israel told Yahweh to shut up and go away, and he did. So now at long last, he is returning. And while one thing remains the same, his children are being abused around the world, another is different in that the remaining remnant is finally prepared to listen. We have softened the beachhead, if you will, for the arrival. Therefore, this is the beginning of forevermore and of happily ever after. Now, many of those gathered before Yahweh on this day will actually have returned with him, which is pretty neat to recognize. They're going to be in the front row seats. These fortunate souls will be the beneficiaries of the ingatherings that have preceded it by 7 years or 1 day of Shabuah and Towrah. The seeds that were sown and cultivated by the final Zeroah, who is the Chakmah Choter, will have taken root and they will have grown such that they can be harvested in season. And for the mortal remnant assembled in Jerusalem, Yom Kippurim is the occasion of their reconciliation, whether they were there all the while and survived the time of Jacob's troubles and the assaults of both progressives and Muslims, or if they were brought in via the airlift of the white spiritual chariot. Of course, the vine, as I have mentioned, of Israel is yielding fruit again. There will be the new wine of inheritance. The land, after having been fallow and choked with weeds, is now productive. And so while there is every advantage to those who were gathered in the harvest, being among this remnant is an enormously favorable situation. The most anti-Semitic, dehumanizing time in all of Jewish history is about to befall, but it will be replaced immediately thereafter with the most esteemed. Those who are being assailed and attacked as if they were the scourge of the earth by Muslims and their progressive pimps will soon be royalty. Then it will be that in the manner as you have been accursed as an object of scorn, you've been mocked and derided, jeered and reproached among the Gentile nations and people of other ethnicities. House of Yehudah and house of Yisrael likewise, albeit by contrast, it's going to be honorably and correctly that I will deliver and liberate you, rescuing and saving you. And you will become a source of blessings and benefits, a gift. Do not be concerned or afraid, choosing to have your hands strengthened and empowered, your influence made resolute and restoring. Memorable men of Yah, Zechariah 8:13. We therefore now know that Yahweh recognizes that he will be returning to his people after a time of great derision and scorn. And when you consider what Jews went through when they were attacked by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, and Imperial Rome, then the Roman Catholic Church, and then the Ottoman Muslims, where they were derided, mocked, jeered. And then by the Roman Catholics who subjugated Jews for 1800 years because of the demonic and demeaning nature of the Christian New Testament. And then, of course, by Muslims today, where in the Quran Jews are dehumanized and demonized by an inhuman and a demon of a god. You recognize that this is going to be exceedingly transformational, astonishing, to go from being perceived as the curse of the earth to the blessing of the earth. The very people who are wrongly accused of genocide and apartheid, colonialization, and all manner of abuse, who are actually the victims of these things, are going to be esteemed. And that is because they will have finally returned and have engaged again in a relationship with Yahowah. But let's be clear, because the Christian New Testament is entirely wrong again. It is not Jesus who is returning. It's Yahowah. God is not returning to Gentiles or to a church. He's returning to Yehudah and Yisrael. And that really makes me mad. Not because God is doing as he said he was going to do. Of course he's doing what he said he was going to do. He never gave up on Yisrael and Yehudah, even when he said, I have to divorce you. I have to leave you for a while. We got to have a time out. He told them even then, I'm coming back for you. You're going to change. And when you change, I will return. You return to me. I'm going to return to you. That's what's going to happen. But you've got this God-forsaken, hideous religion of Christianity that robbed everything from Dode and from Yahowah and from the Torah and from Jews. to create this God-forsaken myth that has persecuted and subjugated Jews for 1,800 years. And they claim that their mythical God-man is returning to the church, when the very book they lug around that they claim is their source of authenticity says that God is returning for his people. Yahudah means the beloved of Yah, Jews, and Yisrael, those who engage and endure in a relationship with God, Israel. Talk about the stupid, immoral, ignorant, and yet 2.5 billion people not only believe this idiotic religion, but they believe that God turned on his own people and sided with those who actually murdered the Messiah and crucified the actual Son of God. It's just astounding that people not only can be that stupid, but be belligerent. You know, you tell them the truth. This is what you did. This is why your religion is false. This is why your New Testament is so hostile. When, Jews says, oh, we stand with Israel. We love Jews because Jesus was a Jew. And you go, God damn you. Have you read your God-forsaken New Testament? Where right there in his first public speech, Peter says, Jews, you're being condemned because you crucified Jesus. And Paul does everything he can to demonize and dehumanize Jews so that he can justify robbing Jews of their inheritance. And God says, no, it's my people I'm offering this inheritance to. I'm coming back for them. I mean, it was a bold-faced lie. And the evidence is ubiquitous. The evidence is undeniable. I mean, faith makes people really, really stupid. And today, unfortunately, there is a faith that does not like to consider itself religious, but those are progressives. The socialists of today, they are believers. They would prefer the lie to the truth. Almost everything they believe and say is the antithesis of evidence and reason. They act more religious than do the religious. And so we are in a period of dumb and dumber. And I don't know which one is in fact, I posed the question, which is dumber? Which ones matter? The Muslims who are perpetrating apartheid and genocide, and yet blaming their victims, are the progressive pimps who are out supporting them. But let's be clear. God was. In the manner that Jews, you've been accursed by these religious and political numbskulls, many of whom, by the way, are Jews. They're not all Gentiles. Some are in the camp of Judaism, not just Islam and Christianity, that are jeering and deriding and mocking Yahweh, the truth, Dode. Talk about mocking. Parading around under a flag that you claim is the Star of David, when that star belongs to Bar Kokhba, the very false Messiah that you perpetrated to obfuscate everything Dode as the Messiah had actually achieved. The very star that you were subjugated and persecuted under. Phew. Just disgusting. But fortunately, shub for shub. Shub for you. Yes, indeed. Because of what we are doing, and I don't care if I have to browbeat Jews back into reality, I'm going to do it. You have been stiff-necked and bullheaded for a very long time, but you've met a bull that is far more determined to get your attention than you are to reject him. And a time is going to come when a goodly number of you are going to accept the truth. You're going to embrace Yahweh by name. You're going to reject Judaism. You're going to reject both progressive and right-wing politics. You're going to come to trust and rely on Yahweh again, and you're going to be in that white chariot. And we're going to come get you, and we're bringing you back to Jerusalem. And then I'm going to lay down my life to extend yours. That is what's going to happen. We have Yahweh's word on it. He has never been wrong. He has never let anyone down, particularly his people, and he's not going to begin now. And so eventually there'll be a remnant of Israel, and you will become a source of blessings and a gift. So don't be concerned. We will prevail. We will strengthen and empower your hand. We will make you resolute. And this is something I do in all of my social media outreach. Without compromise, I want one of the top 10 contributors in places like X, where it is exceedingly difficult to tell the truth and reach a meaningful number of people, but who have fought the battle over the years and have an audience, have the ear of Israelites and Jews worldwide, to embrace this message, to return to Yahweh, to forgo the rabbis, to stop promoting patriotic slogans and support of the IDF, and actually have power, strength, the ability to make an eternal difference. That's what's being offered. And just as Yahweh would prefer to collaborate, so long as he doesn't have to compromise, so would I. But guess what cannot be true under such circumstances? Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Because they are, in the case of Christianity and Islam, based upon replacing Jews so that Goyim can receive God's favors. The religions whose scriptures deride and accuse Jews will watch as those that they have reviled receive Yahweh's blessings. And it's a condemnation of Judaism too, because it is Yahweh who is returning, and he is returning with Dod, the Messiah, the Son of God, and the King. And there will be no rabbis in attendance. God's single most prevalent rant, and this is the thing that I must have said 10,000 times so far in social media, the books, and this Yahowah blog. God's single most repetitive theme in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms is that he despises religion, and that when his people act in a religious matter, they estrange themselves from him. God has spoken out on the Jewish propensity to be religious for 3,400 years, and yet most Jews believe that the way to endear themselves to God is to be religious. How is that possible? You can't actually observe, which means to closely examine and carefully consider the Torah and prophets, and not know that God is anti-religious. And yet, most Jews are, to one degree or another, religious. And yet they claim to be Torah observant. It doesn't equate. You're lying to yourselves. That's not helpful. Now, this statement runs in parallel, as I have shared with you, with Yirmiah 31, where we discover that based upon Yahweh's return, the covenant will be restored with, guess what? Same group of people, Yisrael and Yehudah. And when this occurs, God's people will be uniquely blessed by being given a copy of the Torah, which will be written within them to guide them through eternity. And because they'll have no copy of the Talmud, they will have no copy of the Mishnah, they will have no copy of the Zohar, they'll have no copy of the Quran, they'll have no copy of the Christian New Testament. They're not going to have a church canon. Bye-bye, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. What you thought were scriptures divinely inspired by God are going to be incinerated by him.
See you with Montevideo.
Arrivederci, although he won't be speaking Italian. Yahweh isn't just returning, of course. He is bearing gifts. And that ultimate gift is having the Torah inside of us. I think I may understand the message of the Torah better than most anyone, and most anyone in a very long period of time. But, it's a whole different situation, literally having the Torah written inside of us. And that's what's going to happen. I wonder if people then will still be asking me, can you provide just translations only and no commentary? And you say, excuse me, first of all, why do you need a translation? And if you understood it, well, then you wouldn't need a commentary, would you? So I don't know. Well, since we read, thus says Yahweh of the heavenly envoys. By the way, it's just an interesting thing in this regard. Ever consider the way the Torah is written? Ever consider the way the Torah is written? The Torah, the first book of the Torah is Bereshith. It is dictation. Moshe didn't experience any of it, didn't know any of it. Yahweh simply said, okay, kid, write it down. There you go. Dictation from beginning to end, from Yahweh's mouth to Moshe's pen. All written. Call that your translation. Then it ends with Dabarim. All Dabarim is a commentary on what was previously written. And the things in between are all experience. What the children of Israel experienced from the time that they received the written book of Bereshith in the beginning to the time that Moshe delivered his commentary on the Torah. So the Torah is written exactly the same way as is Yada Yahowah. Here are the words of God as written based upon what he said. And now here's my commentary so that you might understand what God said. Something to think about. Okay, since we've read, thus says Yahweh of the heavenly envoys, you who listen in those days to these words from the mouths of the prophets, in the day the foundation was established for the family of Yahweh of hosts, so that the temple could be built. Your hands should be firm, your influence steadfast to restore and empower. So it ends with the exact same words we've just read and the conclusion of Zechariah 8:13. Choosing to have your hands strengthened and empowered, your influence resolute and restoring. Same conclusion, correct? So this is obviously the means to accomplish that. To have your influence be resolute and effective, to empower and enrich others, to be steadfast. The means to it, therefore, has to be this, which is what Yahweh introduced at a much earlier point in the Zechariah narrative, which is that Yahowah says, if you listen to those who spoke the words of the prophets in the day that the foundation for the home for the family of Yahowah of hosts was established, and the temple, then this will be the result for you. And at the time I said, we need to go back and consider the words of the prophets who were spoken at this time, because there were 3 of them that spoke to us at this time. You had Shamuel deliver the oratory of Nathan pursuant to the lives of Dod, as the king, as the returning savior, and as returning king. And 2 Samuel 7. Have the astonishing oratory, the greatest piece of literature ever written, the 89th Mizmor or Psalm, which is the Song of Dod, which Yahowah is the prophetic spokesperson for that book that tells us everything about what Dod represents and what he will achieve in the lives of his people, and even how he will have a herald, but how Dod lived his first life, what he did in his second, and what he will achieve in his third, in the 89th Mizmor. That's another of the prophets at this time. The third of those is Solomon. And Solomon gave one of the most interesting prophetic addresses in the history of humankind at this time, literally at the dedication of the house of Yahweh's name, this first temple. And it tells God's people how they can be firm, resolute, steadfast, and sure, confident at this time. So it's appropriate for us to go back in time and consider what was said on that day. And in context, this narrative begins. At that time, Solomon, which means reconciliation, gathered the elders of Israel with the heads of every tribe, the leadership of the fathers of the children of Israel, to the king, to Solomon in Jerusalem, to ascend with the ark of the covenant of Yahowah from the city of Dod, which is Zion. This is Malachim 1 Kings 8:1. I think everybody knows that Kings and Chronicles tell the same story, slightly different words, but they cover the same swath of history. And so it is interesting when we're introducing a profound statement from Words of the Day, Debarim, that we establish the scene using the record that was maintained in Malachim, and this from 1 Kings 8, which will lead then to the discussion of 2 Chronicles 6. It's an interesting approach to it, and that's what we're going to do here, because I really want us collectively to establish the proper perspective to perceive what is one of the greatest prophecies in the writings, and so that Israel knows who it is that is the Nakri and how they must respond to this person's message. So we're not going to just cite the 2 verses that present the Nakri. We're going to present all of the lead up to it and even the follow-up after it. I'm not sure there's much more important for Israel to know at this time. Okay, so let's begin. The person speaking is Shalomo. It's a derivation of reconciliation, kind of a play off of that name, meaning to bring peace and harmony to the relationship, and therefore to reconcile the relationship. Solomon was obviously one of Dod's sons. Now, Dod was a lot of things, but he was not a great father. And he is on record giving Solomon some very good fatherly advice, but there is no indication that Dode played the role of father very well. And there's a lot of evidence that Dode didn't. Although he clearly loved his children, he even loved Absalom, who tried to kill him and perpetrate a coup against him, steal Yisrael from him. But Dode's eldest son raped his daughter, and Absalom murdered his eldest son and started this coup. So when we say that Solomon was Dode's son, it's true, but this was not Dode's highest calling. Solomon was iffy in his statements prior to the announcement that we're going to consider. Won't be in this program because there's too much to cover. It'll be in our next or following one. And he went from iffy to just being bad over time. He became the embodiment of the worst of Israel. He became religious. He became gluttonous. He became arrogant. He's brought the worship of foreign gods into Israel. But at this moment, he is the king. He is the orator. He is the one who has completed the construction of the house of Yahweh's name. He didn't do it himself. He was no architect or builder, but he hired architects and builders. Didn't have a very good relationship with them, but nonetheless, he did so. Dode had acquired most of the materials. He still brought some on his own recognizance, and now he was celebrating the completion of the house that Yahweh and Dode had created the diorama of and left to him. So he gathered the elders of Yisrael with the heads of every tribe, the leadership of the fathers of the children of Yisrael, to the king, to Solomon in Jerusalem. Now, that probably was not the best choice. He shouldn't have drawn the people to himself. He should have drawn the people to Yahweh. But we're going to be both accommodating to and critical of Solomon all the way through this process. And it was to ascend with the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh. And the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh was where one would have naturally thought it would have been during this process. It was in the city of Dode. Jerusalem is the city of Dode. And it also says, which is Zion. And Zion is this ridge line between the city of Dode and the Temple Mount. It runs the ridge line going up Moriah. Moriah and Zion are one and the same in the sense that the city of Dode and the Temple Mount are on Mount Moriah, which means to revere Yah, and Zion are the signs posted along the way between Dode's home, lower on the southern part of the ridge line, and Yahweh's at the summit and northern end of that ridge line. And so the Ark of the Covenant was in the city of Dode, and it was being brought up to the Temple Mount that Dode had purchased and had prepared for God's home. So pretty interesting setup to understand what was happening. Construction of the building on the summit of Moriah, known as the First Temple, had commenced 7 years earlier. And it was at this time that the Ark of the Covenant needed to be brought home. This Bereth Shem Yahweh was complete. The home for Yahweh's name was, well, it would have been, while it was complete in terms of a building, it was incomplete without the Aaron Bereth Yahweh. So the Be'eth Shem Yahweh needed the Aaron Bereth Yahweh. Similarly, the relevance of Ir Dode, the city of Dode, that resides on the Sion, the signs posted along the way, is insightful for those who want to know what these words mean and what God is communicating through them. And we're gathered to King Solomon. It should have been to Yahowah, but gathered to King Solomon, all of the men of Israel in the lunar month of Ethan, ever flowing and long established, during the Chag celebration of the promise of the 7th month and time of renewal. I'm sure it's just a detail to many, just a few words tossed in to provide a narrative, a history of events. Not to me. The Ark of the Covenant, which is the only thing that matters to God, the covenant, his family. This ability to make this connection between the home for Yahweh's name and the Ark of the family came from the city of Dod up the ridgeline of Zion to enter the home of Yahweh's name for the covenant family on Towrah. Towrah was the Chag celebration. It is the promise that is offered on the first day of the 7th month in this time of renewal. And that Ethan, the name of the lunar month that commences with Towrah, means ever flowing, long established. It is on Towrah that the ever flowing, long established waters will emerge from beneath the home for Yahweh's name to cleanse the children of Israel, and they will continue to flow forevermore. It is in conjunction with the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, who is the Choter, that will occur on Towrah, this day, the first day of the 7th month. One of the interesting things that takes place during new moons, as the sun's light just begins to reflect and increase its presence across the surface of the moon, is it's the only time that a solar eclipse can occur. So if you're witnessing a solar eclipse, you know, in fact, that this is the first day of a new month. There will be a solar eclipse on the fulfillment of this day. In 2033, the 24th of September, it will be a Shabat. Of course, the eclipsing of the sun on this day is telling because the Adamah Parah is the lesser luminary, reflecting the greater luminary's light as presented in the 4th day of creation on behalf of the Moed, these restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. And so for this moment, what the lesser luminary does is the Adamah Parah, this Chakmah Choter, it will eclipse the sun's light. But all of this is happening, all occurring on Towrah, the day of the herald. And it is in this context that everything we read from this point on, including the announcement of the Nakri, flows from this point. The Nakri is therefore equated to, shines most brightly, is most important. in association with the first day of the 7th month, this time of renewal of Towrah. It is the whole story coming together. It is why the insights and the commentary are sometimes even more important than the words themselves. Because it's one thing to know, and I love the Word of God for providing the knowledge that we need to know. But there's something far more powerful than knowing, and that's understanding. We were just given an enormously powerful insight into the connection between the Nakar, the Nakri as it's presented here, and this person who God's going to provide in the last days that Israel will benefit from if they listen to. And the day that this will occur on Towrah, in conjunction with ever-flowing and long-established waters during this Chag celebration, which is the promise of the 7th month. It is almost breathtaking how many affirmations, how many just marvelous insights that can be derived from God's testimony, even when we examine the details. So this timing is relevant because Yahweh wanted to showcase what would transpire on this date exactly 3,000 years later to the day, to the first day of the 7th month in year 6000 Yah, September 23rd and 24th, 2033, during Yom Teruah, the day of the herald, the final gleaning and ultimate sacrifice that would bring Yisrael back together with Dod and Yahweh in exactly this same place on Mount Moriah. And God intends for his homecoming to be joyous, a Chag celebration. Moreover, the one cultivating this ingathering and offering the sacrifice on Towrah is the very individual Solomon spoke prophetically about, and whom Yahweh has been referencing throughout Zechariah. He is the memorable man of Yah. And the elders of Yisrael and the priests came and they lifted up the ark. As for other affirmations, the blood of the Nakri will be sprinkled upon the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant with a replica tent of the restoring witness on the Moed of Kippurim, also in the 7th month. We read in Malachim, 1 Kings 8:4. They ascended with the ark of Yahweh and with the tent of the tabernacle of the restoring witness and eternal testimony regarding the meeting times, in addition to all of the set apart and special vessels and implements, which for the benefit of the relationship were in the tabernacle, the priests and the Lowi ascended with them. They ascended with the ark. You know, it's the Ark of the Covenant that will be raised. Again, I think likely during the last 3.5 years, at least to be seen. Certainly the tablets of stone within it going to be held up by Yahowah, a malach of Yahowah. And that Ark of the Covenant that exists in Jerusalem, in Yirmiah's tunnel now, will be brought forth for Dode to anoint with the blood of the Adamah Parah and the goat. Orchestrating this event is Elia. And they will be living in a restoration of the restoring witness, this tabernacle of the restoring witness to the eternal testimony on the Temple Mount. And it is the greater and lesser luminaries of the fourth day of creation that live to fulfill and proclaim the Moed, these restoring meeting times. And that's why this is the Oel Moed. And all of the other accoutrements that foreshadow and explain the nature of the relationship Yahowah intends with us. All of them were coming home. Malachim, 1 Kings 8:4. With the house completed, the tent of the restoring witness was no longer needed, but the covenant home will return as the witnesses return to Jerusalem. And it's going to serve as our home and the home for the Aaron Bereth Yahowah, which our Father will rise for the occasion. And this is probably a great place for us to conclude this program. We've gone over an hour's time, and I'm still just reveling in the fact that Yahowah would declare what day this was going to happen in conjunction with his Nachri, and that it would be his Nachri's day, Yom Teruah, the day of the herald, when all of this will transpire, and all of this transpired, therefore, on that same day. And I'm just so grateful for Yahowah reaffirming this, telling us all the details of how the story came to be and will be. So thank you for listening. I am your host, Craig Winn. The aforementioned Choter and soon-to-be mentioned Nachri. And I thank you for listening. Good day.